Stylization is something that sits at the core of any film. Writing has a style, cinematography has a style, editing has a style. It's what gives a film an identity in the first place. What I'm getting at here is that stylizing your movie is one of the most important parts of a director's job, and when I say the words stylization and movie together, there's one person that probably comes to mind. Wes Anderson is a director who often sits on the odder side of cinema to most people, but he is arguably one of the most popular directors in 21st century cinema. If you ask most people, name a director most people don't know, they'll speak his name, despite Grand Budapest Hotel grossing $174 million as of the beginning of 2026. And he makes a lot of movies. From 1996 to 2025, he's released 12 feature films and a set of 4 short films for Netflix based off Roald Dahl short stories, each of which often accepts high praise from general audiences. Anderson's visual style is dominated by 3 main elements: symmetry, stiffness, and saturation. His subjects will often sit in the centre of the frame, with the set design offering a near perfect symmetry to backdrop them. The camera is most often locked off, but if it does start to move, it will do so in an incredibly stiff and perpendicular manner, with blocking often reflecting this in the way actors move around the frame. And every shot has the saturation cranked up as high as it can go, causing a very dreamlike feeling to come over his movies. This, matched with his fantastically dry writing style, leads to a feeling of extreme oddity and sometimes otherworldliness.
Yeah, we're terrible. Please come.
Sure.
Oh, wait. Can I get your number? Wow, girl number.
See you at the show, Scott Pilgrim.
Oh, hey, it's tonight. At the...
Edgar Wright is both a very similar and very different director to Wes Anderson. His movies are energetic and witty, his characters crack jokes constantly, and his usage of visual comedy is fantastic. This is clear just by watching one of the Cornetto trilogy films. However, his writing in Scott Pilgrim vs. the World could be called Anderson-esque on occasion.
Oh, God.
What is it, Scott?
I had this totally weird dream.
Oh, God. What is it, other Scott? Can we skip the dream time? Color me not interested.
Wright is one of those directors who kind of sits in a middle zone in terms of box office numbers, with his films grossing an average of $65 million worldwide, with Baby Driver's impressive $107 million doing a lot of the heavy lifting in that regard. And their most separating characteristic is how they use genre. Wes Anderson is very favourable to the adventure comedy genre, whereas one of Edgar's most brilliant features is his bending of genres. The iconic Cornetto trilogy, Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz, and The World's End are all movies that take traditional action genres and place them in rarely used at the time British settings, Hot Fuzz in particular placing the classic buddy cop action film in rural Gloucestershire. Edgar Wright's visual style can also be defined by 3 main elements: visual comedy, transitions, and synchronization. Edgar's visual comedy is one of the first things that's apparent when you start one of his movies. Things enter and leave the frame in funny ways, and he withholds information from you, so it hits with good comedic timing when it comes. This thing that you most likely know him for are his transitions. Edgar rarely uses a jump cut, and sometimes he'll match cut or have a person walk across the frame, or have the next frame creep into the previous before the cut. He's endlessly creative with the way story moves along, and he gives his films a fantastic flow that's hard to find elsewhere. And lastly, synchronization. What would he be without it? He'll synchronize entire movies to music or sound effects, and there's always at least one scene that features it. It deepens the immersion of his films tenfold. Just take a look at this for a second and you might come to agree with me.
You know you scratch just like a monkey. Yeah, you do. Real, yeah. You slide into the rhythm note. Yeah. How low can you go? Oh, come on, baby.
Now that you know a little more about Wright and Anderson, I'd like to move on to the purpose of this video. There is one vital difference between Wes Anderson and Edgar Wright. Both directors utilise stylization heavily, and it is something they both receive high praise for. However, I believe Wes Anderson has lost himself in his style in recent years, laser focusing on making one type of movie that works, and it has led to a noticeable dip in quality. Edgar Wright, on the other hand, has not displayed a dip to as dramatic a degree. His movies always feel so fresh and high quality, and I believe it is down to his willingness to constantly try new things with his films. How can I prove this? Well, I watched every Wes Anderson film and every Edgar Wright film, and I believe there are multiple films along each director's journey that can highlight my point perfectly. So let's start from the beginning. I will only talk about Spaced and Bottle Rocket briefly, as they're both very early on in the directors' careers, and only really show small sparks of potential in what was to come for both. With Spaced, in a lot of ways, Edgar had it completely figured out from day one. Just looking at episode 1, you can see foundations for Shaun of the Dead.
Bloody knew it!
I'm sorry. No, I really am. It doesn't feel right. Okay?
Fine.
Alright?
Fine.
Sarah, please don't do this.
You can leave your stuff here until you find somewhere else.
Sean.
Yeah.
It's not that I don't like Ed. Ed, it's not that I don't like you.
It's alright.
Well, I mean, it's not that I don't like David and Donnie, you know. Guys, it's not that I don't like you.
It's alright.
And Scott Pilgrim vs. the World.
Getting to know you, getting to know all about you.
Edgar was already developing ideas that he would use later on to great effect in his films. Bottle Rocket, on the other hand, doesn't offer the same instant recognition. There are echoes of what's to come, but Anderson's signature techniques today aren't fully present here. His tracking shots, for example, lack his usual perpendicularity, and some shot choices feel slightly similar to his modern work, but they lack his usual saturation. Another thing of note is the casting of the film. Bottle Rocket features actors who will return regularly in Anderson's future work. Luke and Owen Wilson, two actors who would return in his later films, especially Owen Wilson, who would go to appear in 6 more films by the director. He was experimenting with this one, and it shows in the rough nature of it. Moving on to our next pair of films, I would like to compare Shaun of the Dead and Rushmore, the films that immediately follow on from their previous work, as I think they both mark a significant jump into becoming more familiar to a viewer of the two's modern efforts. Rushmore features a drastic difference in quality and stylization compared to Bottle Rocket. In between the two, Anderson picked up his signature framing and humour, with many shots featuring that central actor placement and symmetry, and his stiff tracking shots. This is also the first time Anderson cast Bill Murray and Jason Schwartzman, two actors who are in many of his films going forward. Shaun of the Dead also shows Wright using the tools at his disposal to greater effect. It features an iconic long take that is mirrored before and after the apocalypse. This is a move that Wright uses later in Baby Driver, which we'll talk upon soon. It also uses a short segment of music synchronization later in the climax of the film, once again reminiscent of Baby Driver, in which he takes this concept as a central part of the film's identity. Going forward a few years, The Darjeeling Limited and Scott Pilgrim vs. the World is where I would argue that both directors fully come into their own. Both are very stylized in their presentation with an incredible story underneath. However, this is where they split, a sort of crossroads for the directors. The Darjeeling Limited is a film that I would call extremely Anderson in the way that he's fully lent into his style by this point. However, I wouldn't say that this is a bad thing, as he maintains emotional depth, not letting his dialogue style cloud certain scenes. Take the scene where Peter fails to save a child who was trapped in a rapidly flowing river.
Get the little one.
Francis!
Peter!
He's all bloody!
He's dead, he's dead.
He's dead?
The rocks killed him.
You're bleeding like crazy.
Peter! You okay?
I didn't save mine.
मुकेश कहाँ हो गए करे पड़ गए मुकेश मुकेश अरे सांस नहीं चली देखिए अरे कौन है तुम लोग क्या कर दिया मेरे छोरे को मारा चोट डॉक्टर ने बुला करे पड़ गया.
The way Anderson has learned to have these moments of emotional tenderness in his films shows his maturity as a director. Scott Pilgrim vs. the World is stylized to the purest degree. Edgar had been playing with video game-like sound effects in his previous 2 films, and this one utilises them to create an atmosphere of playfulness and fun. The film also uses one of Edgar's main techniques perfectly, his transitions, with scenes like when Scott breaks up with knives. Having this conveyor belt that is Scott's mind slowly drifting from the heartbroken knives to his new girlfriend Ramona is perfect visual storytelling. Wright also decided to utilise on-screen animation in this film, in the style of a comic book, which this film is an adaptation of. The way he takes advantage of the medium he's adapting from to give his film a striking visual identity is amazing. The next films I want to talk about are what I consider each director's magnum opus, The Grand Budapest Hotel and Baby Driver. These 2 films are in my mind perfect. Each movie shows a level of directorial perfection that I think is Wright and Anderson's greatest efforts. Grand Budapest is the peak of Anderson's set design and comedic writing, with its central characters both being immensely lovable and 3-dimensional. The usage of saturated colour is on full display, and I would call this film the purest form of the Wes Anderson style. He's firing on all cylinders and he's still trying new things. None of his films before this had this level of set control. Each set is a masterpiece, especially the hotel lobby, and each location has been chosen masterfully. This is the end point of Anderson's rise to artistic perfection, and I believe from this point he's stopped improving. Baby Driver is Wright's musically synchronized masterpiece. Each moment in this film took the music into consideration, synchronizing every action to the beat in a work of direction I can only call a Herculean task that Wright met in full measure. I won't hide it, this is my favourite movie of all time, not only because of the music, but the driving is shot entirely practically, so many complex stunts that you can tell Edgar has wanted to shoot since Hot Fuzz. Baby Driver also shows a more traditional sense of genre, feeling very focused and refined. Edgar understands action movies intimately and utilises that knowledge as a vessel for a Bonnie and Clyde style romance. The evolution of techniques he started all the way back in Shaun of the Dead is astounding. The long take featured in this film has so much detail, much more than Shaun's. The detail on every frame of this film is amazing. It's what started my journey as a filmmaker. Learning that you could pack so much stuff into a movie inspired me to pursue the art form. Our final 2 films, and the films that articulate my point, are Last Night in Soho and The French Dispatch. Last Night in Soho is another branch out for Wright, this time into the horror genre. He's played around with horror elements in Shaun of the Dead, but this is a full dive into it, and I personally love it. His visual style is incredible in this film, with the lighting playing an especially large part in the visual identity. The usage of blue and red light especially gives the film a moody aesthetic that works incredibly in its favour, and once again, is almost entirely new to Wright. This film is experimental. On the other hand, The French Dispatch runs into major problems. It does try something new visually, the usage of black and white, however I believe this steps off the ledge of experimentation into the pretentious, goes as far into symbolism to the point that it's too obscure to occur to the viewer what Anderson means to say with it, if anything at all. The rest of the film still suffers from problems. A dialogue style that was so entertaining in Grand Budapest now feels tired and overused, as Anderson appears to have settled into it as a formula, instead of attempting to do new and interesting things with it. My main point can be highlighted even better by this. His following work, Asteroid City, which I believe minorly alleviates this problem, is then followed by The Phoenician Scheme, the film that inspired this whole essay. This film shows a level of high creative bankruptcy. Even The French Dispatch didn't blatantly copy Grand Budapest's formula in the way this film does. It features not only similar visuals, but an entirely the same character dynamic. Anderson has become too settled into his director's chair, clearly not afraid of trying new things, but refusing to do so. One last thing I'd like to do is talk about where Wright and Anderson get their inspiration from. Just as I like to take cues from them in my work, they will have done the same thing along their journeys. Edgar cites An American Werewolf in London and its director John Landis as a major inspiration. It went on to inspire the genre bending he's so famous for, with the melding of comedy and horror displayed in the film having a big impact on him. He was specifically blown away by the detail, something he would take to heart as an artist, an incredibly prevalent part of his work being his eye for detail. Anderson takes heavy inspiration from Francois Truffaut, citing him as a role model. Having these kinds of role models is incredibly important to being a director. I have many I look up to and watch out for when the trailers play in the cinema. Acknowledging the fact that Kubrick, Spielberg, even Hitchcock all had people who inspired their craft is incredibly important as a director. Your inspirations are the foundations of your work, and having those artists to look up to and aspire to match or even surpass their artistic merit will help you reach heights you couldn't otherwise. Overall, Anderson is still an incredibly important director to me. I think most of his films are fantastic, and I think he's an amazing artist, which is why it makes it so painful to see him go downhill like he has in recent years. The Phoenician Scheme was the first Anderson picture I caught in the cinema, and that should have been something special, but it wasn't, and as someone who looks up to him in many ways, that was very disappointing. Wright, on the other hand, has never failed to disappoint me. Even The Running Man, a film other people seem to find less enjoyable than his other work, I still found incredibly fun to watch. He's taking a step into novel adaptation, another new thing for him, and the fact that I enjoy it so much still supports my point. I'm still excited to see what the future holds for Wes Anderson. I hope he tries something new again, like he has many times before. Thank you for watching.